Hey, this is Josh Brom, and I wanted to put a podcast out. This is one of the things I was hoping to do toward the end of last year before the Christmas break, and then just didn't happen. And there's another thing I was actually wanting to do before Christmas break that I'm going to combine both into this thing. I've always done kind of a top 5 posts and videos of the year at the end of the year, and this year we just didn't have time. We were focusing so much on getting the quick response series out, and obviously there was some fundraising there at the end of the year. Some things just didn't get done that were at the top of the priority list. But I know the podcast hasn't been updated in about 3.5 months now, which is not ideal. And I wish that I put some kind of little announcement just explaining we're going to be on break for a while and why, but I didn't. So what I want to do here is go ahead and tell you why we've been gone and kind of what's been going on behind the scenes of the podcast, as well as tell you about the top 5 posts and videos and podcasts of 2021. And I'll put links to everything in the show notes if you want to click on those for any of those things that you have missed in the last year. So we've been gone for 3.5 months. Basically, there's one big reason for that, which is that in the last fall, my speaking went way up. So, my speaking had been down for obviously because of COVID, but it was starting to crawl up in last spring, and then last fall was pretty busy with a lot of speaking trips, including one, forget what were the numbers. It was a 6-day trip. It was like 8 speeches in 6 days plus 2 days of outreach. It was a really that was a hard trip. The problem is when I'm on the road, I'm not getting video editing done. Right now, ERI only owns one computer that is powerful enough to edit 4K video, which is not this laptop. This laptop, back when it was newer, it could handle that. This laptop is about as old as ERI. I bought it like right in the beginning of ERI. And so at this point, it just isn't powerful enough to pull that off. At some point, I'll need to upgrade. But at this point, there's a tower under this desk. That is the PC that can edit these videos. And so while I've got contractors that I'll have do like bits of editing, so I've got like a contractor who typically does the first pass on all of our podcasts, but then I still have a lot of work to do in my pass. I've also got a contractor right now who is working on the next Apologist Reacts video, because I've got several of those that have been filmed but just not edited. So I'm kind of training him on how I like those edited. But all in all, I still have to do the bulk of the editing for the stuff that gets out. And so if I'm on the road and if I don't have a laptop with me to edit, that's like assuming I had very much time in like hotel rooms or airports where I could edit, which isn't always the case on a trip anyway. The editing workflow grinds to a halt. Everything else can be going. Andrew and Emily can be working on blog posts. They can be working on video scripts and stuff like that. And yet stuff's not getting edited. So we ended up at a place where we had and still have about a half dozen podcasts that are filmed. They're good. They're interesting, interviews with different people, and they are on a stack of hard drives over here. I think there's 3 Apologist Reacts that you guys haven't seen. There's several quick response videos still that we filmed that we haven't put out. We've got 27 total, I think right now. We've put out like 23 of them. So that's been the case for the last several months. So when I came back, obviously there was some fundraising to do. It was the end of the year. There was some administrative stuff, but also as far as editing goes, we decided as a staff that we were going to prioritize the quick response videos over keeping the podcast consistent. Like there was this goal of try to edit the first, 20 or so of those and get them done so that we can just stop thinking about editing them for a few months, focus on end of year fundraising and having a break. Like our staff always takes, a week, maybe a week and a half off at the end of the year. So there were days where it's like, hey, Josh, you're just focusing on editing. No one have any meetings with him, no one anything. And I'm just editing as many of those as I could. And I got enough done. But there was no way to get all of those quick response videos edited and also stay consistent with the podcast. So the podcast is what fell down the priority list, and it's not ideal. I like podcasts. I like keeping the podcast up, but that's what happened. So the bad news is that our goal for fundraising, one of our big goals was to hire a part-time video editor who could help us stay more consistent with these things even while I am on the road. So we had a goal of raising $100,000 in new or increased giving. And that would include some increased costs that we have coming up this year, plus a video editor. And unfortunately, we raised about half of that goal, which is great, super grateful to all of you who gave, but we also still don't have enough for a video editor. So I've got a couple of irons in the fire where it might be some kind of last minute solution, but as of right now, as of me recording this, we are probably not hiring a video editor real soon. And so That's the bad news. But the good news is now that we're back and now that, like I've got a month or a month and a half that I don't have speaking events, at least not that I'm aware of, I'm going to be able to get back into editing with a lot more of my time. So podcast consistency is coming back. YouTube consistency is coming back. So I've got like tomorrow, I need to edit a quick response video and then I'm going to get to work on the next podcast. And so we are back. Thank you for your patience. Moving forward, if we have to have a break like this, I'm going to try to have something like this at the beginning of that, just to keep you guys updated on what's going on, as opposed to kind of a retroactive, here's what's been going on thing. Now, before I tell you about the top 5 videos and articles of the year, I mentioned to the staff that I was going to do that on this, and Emily said, okay, if you're going to do that, you have to mention the TikTok stats. So let me tell you about TikTok real quick. I cannot believe I'm saying this out loud. We are on TikTok. I don't know if you know this, but ERI now has a TikTok account. We talked about it a lot. We've been kind of thinking about what platforms we want to add, and we decided to try TikTok. So Emily did a lot of researching about it. And ironically, after that research, we were thinking probably this wouldn't end up working that well for ERI as much as we would like to have our content in more places. But we still decided, let's test it. Let's try it for a couple of weeks and see how it goes. And we were all stunned by how well it went. So TikTok is not going away. This is now one of Emily's top priorities, to get a TikTok video out a day. So there's content on our TikTok that is nowhere else. Like I think we're duplicating some on Instagram Reels and some on YouTube Shorts, or getting ready to do that. But if you want to get this great content that mainly Emily is putting together, that's short, is in the 1 to 3 minute range, you should follow us on TikTok. And I'll tell you how well it's gone. So we've been up for, I think, about a week and a half as of recording this, and we already have 564 followers. That number has quintupled in the last couple of days. 40,000 views in a week and a half. To put that in context, that's about a third of the YouTube views we've gotten in the entire history of this channel. The TikTok has exploded. 5,500 likes and over 2,000 comments, which has been really interesting to see, kind of pro-choice and pro-life back and forth. And it's been an interesting situation where one of the things we've noticed is that we're getting a lower common denominator on the pro-choice arguments that we're seeing than, for example, when we're on a college campus. And so Emily's going to be responding to some of those arguments with TikTok replies. Like you can just do like a video reply instead of typing out a comment. And so she's going to definitely be doing that. So if you've been interested in more ERI content where we are responding to not the top shelf of pro-choice comments, then TikTok is going to be the place to do that. So follow us at Equal Rights Institute, and hopefully you will enjoy the really cool content that Emily's. I've completely delegated this. Like, this is completely Emily. And she's doing a lot with Meredith, her roommate. And I know this is going to be making me record some. She's made that very clear. We were going to record some in DC. We just got back from DC. We were going to record some in DC, but we literally basically were filled up every hour that we were there and not asleep with either activities or events or meetings. Sometimes like meetings happen at the last minute. And so I didn't have time to record a TikTok with her yet, but that is going to be coming soon. So that's super exciting. Okay, now let me tell you about the top 5 videos, podcasts, articles of the year. And so I'll start with videos, since this is a video as well as a podcast. But on the top 5 videos, we had over 44,000 views on YouTube last year, which represents a 29% increase over the previous year. So YouTube is doing great. That's one of our biggest increases as far as our metrics last year. And the top 5 videos. So number 5, so I'll do this in decreasing order. Number 5 was the Sealioning video. So this is a YouTube video that was paired with an article that Emily wrote early in the year about this word that I had never heard of before, sealioning, which is kind of this obnoxious thing people can do sometimes where they're like constantly badgering you for sources while also reminding you that they are the reasonable one in the dialogue. I hope I got that definition about right, but watch the video or read the article if you missed it. It's interesting. I have not seen any other apologists talk about sealioning, but we saw this as a thing that people on the internet talk about, and we wanted to respond to it, give you some ways to avoid it, and also what to do if a pro-choice person is sealioning you. Number 4 was the live stream that we did on the Supreme Court abortion case. So our staff listened to the Dobbs oral arguments live. We were just on Zoom with each other and taking a ton of notes. And then literally the next evening, we filmed a live stream where we talked through a lot of the things that we noticed about Dobbs. And so that video is our number 4 video of the year. Number 3, this is one I'm really proud of. This is the Pastors You Can Reduce Abortions in Your Church video. This is a video based on a Pastor Pledge article that I wrote several years ago. It's always been one of my favorite things that I've written here at ERI. It's something that we've partnered with CareNet a lot as a result, really, of that article. And there are a lot of pastors around the country that have taken this pledge to make their church a safe place for unwed pregnant women. But we'd never made a video about it. I wrote that article back before we were a lot of times making a video and an article and putting them out at the same time about the same topic. And so Andrew did a great job of taking my article, which was a pretty long article, and editing it down for a video. And he added a little bit of extra content of his own, which was fun. In fact, an interesting behind the scenes fact was I filmed that just because of the situation of my filming day that day. I had to actually record that video. We have a teleprompter. So I just put what Andrew gave me into the teleprompter. And so I'm reading live, not having even known the stuff that Andrew added. And I think if you watch it closely, you might every once in a while see a twinkle in my eye where internally I'm getting excited, oh, that's new. That's really good. You're just excited about Andrew's contribution to that. So that's that video. That is share that all over the place. We want churches all over the world doing that thing. I think it's a really unique idea and something that you can do to help bring the Christian abortion rate down, because there are a lot of abortions happening in the church. And I don't think they're just happening with non-Christians or cultural Catholics who don't really care about Jesus. There's specific reasons that this is happening. And I think my idea can help make it more likely that a single mom in a church would choose life for her baby and not go to Planned Parenthood to prevent the kind of stigma and shame that can be particular to the Christian church. Our second most popular video this was another one of Emily's. This was the Unpacking Youth Poet Laureate Amanda Gorman's pro-choice arguments video. This was early in the year. This was a really cool thing where we were already filming with Emily the next day. She was going to fly in and we were going to film a bunch of videos and podcasts. And we saw that video. I think one of our readers or listeners or donors sent that in, and we decided we need to respond to this. And so Emily and Meredith and Andrew and I worked really hard that evening. We worked out a draft. I think Emily drafted it, and then Andrew and I were early the next morning doing our editing passes while Emily is flying over. It was just all hands on deck. Let's try to get a script done. And we filmed it the next day. So I think that video is really good. And then the number 1, I'm surprised a little bit that this is the most popular video. And then on another level, I guess I'm not surprised. But this is the video about Ravi Zacharias that I filmed last year. This is the Integrity, Hypocrisy, and Witness, Learning from the Failures of Ravi Zacharias. And so this was a few months after the scandal about Ravi came out, and I hadn't planned on doing anything about it, but then Andrew had a really good idea as far as an angle. Andrew wrote a lot of the script. I wrote the first big section. There's kind of a section that's kind of my personal reaction to the scandal. And then it gets into kind of lessons from it. So Andrew wrote basically all the lesson stuff and I wrote my experience about that. So that's the number 1 video. On podcasts. So I wasn't including any of the podcast videos because obviously our podcast now is a video podcast. I'm filming this on camera as well as there's obviously the audio will go out on our podcast feed. So just treated podcasts as their own category. Number 5 most popular podcast. This was one of the episodes with Dr. Javad Hashmi. This is episode number 72. Muslim intellectual debunks pro-choice Islamic scholars. So this was an idea that Javad had of taking some of the really big Muslim YouTubers who have sometimes made pro-choice arguments and responding why these are not very good arguments. And it's very specific kind of to Muslim theology or the way that Muslim theology is interpreted by some modern day theologians and YouTubers. So number 4 was the part 2 of a 2-part series on AHA that I did with Jonathon Van Maren. I think he is the expert on abolish human abortion. And we don't generally want to spend a lot of time talking about what other pro-life people do. Although AHA is a weird case because AHA would be very offended to be called pro-life. So they're not really pro-life because they say that they're not pro-life, but they're on the anti-abortion team, or maybe they feel like they're on their own team. But regardless, we decided like every once in a while it's okay to do something like this. And AHA has been confusing enough to enough people, and also has been a real problem for our sidewalk counselors. The sidewalk counselors that take our sidewalk counseling master class often complain about, or just ask us what to do if they go out to sidewalk counsel and either AHA or someone acting like AHA, trains people to act, is there literally making it so they're saving fewer lives, because their methods can kind of chase women into the abortion facility. And so I did a 2-part with Jonathon, Maren, and part 2 is the number 4 most popular podcast we did. And then this was one of my favorite ones. This might be my favorite podcast I've ever filmed. I was so excited about this. I was excited about this leading up to it, and I had a ball recording it, and I was super excited afterwards. So this was episode 62, A Comedian Shares Tips for Using Humor in Dialogue. Humor is something specific to ERI. It's actually one of our core values, which is really cool. We care about humor, both internally, as far as our staff being sane and not taking ourselves too seriously, and we have a good time with each other, in our daily staff calls and things like that. But also externally, meaning I literally write jokes for our speeches, or sometimes giving speeches just in the moment, I'll come up with something funny. And I do that because I want to keep people's attention, and because I just think it's a value. It brings us down to earth a little bit. And I just don't want people to feel like we're all like super ivory tower and snooty and everything. And I enjoy comedy. And so Josh Harris, who's a Christian comedian, came on to talk about humor and dialogue. We had a podcast earlier, a long time ago, with Tim and Rachel and I talking about humor and dialogue. And this time I got to have a legit comedian give some ideas. And that was really interesting. And there's takeaways from that episode that I still bring up in my speeches now. Number 2 most popular was the replay of the Supreme Court, the Dobbs live stream. A while later, like days, maybe a week later, I finally grabbed the audio from the replay and just threw it in the podcast feed. And that was the number 2 most popular podcast. A lot of people very interested in Dobbs. That shouldn't be that surprising. And then the number 1 by far episode was the part 1 of the AHA series with Jonathon Van Maren. That got a lot of interest. I think some of that interest was from the so-called abolitionists themselves, obviously, but then there were a lot of other pro-life people that were just kind of interested in hearing our take on that issue. So those were the top 5 podcasts. And by the way, I forgot to mention this earlier. So on the podcast, we had almost 38,000 downloads, which represents a 4% increase over last year. So just a little bit of an increase, but at the same time, again, we weren't putting out podcasts for the last 3.5 months. So that number would have been a lot higher if we had been able to stay consistent, but we are understaffed. And so it is what it is. Okay. The top 5 articles, and I always do a top 5 articles written this year. Like all of that stuff is, I'm only tracking the things that we put out this year, but I'm also going to share with you the top 3 legacy articles, meaning that we wrote from before last year, but we're still really high up on our Google Analytics, sometimes higher than some of these top 5. So the top 5 new articles on the blog, which had a little over 37,000 readers, which is a 4% decrease, actually. The blog is one of the few metrics that we saw decrease. This has been going on for a couple of years now. The blog will go down by like 3%, 4%. And I think that has everything to do with where our people are at. I think our target demographic is like, the younger half of living pro-life people, and the younger half of living people in general are reading blog articles less, and they are taking in their information on YouTube and or podcasts more. So as we see major increases on YouTube and podcasts, we're seeing little decreases on the blog. I think that trend is probably going to continue. That doesn't mean we're going to stop doing the blog, by the way. We're going to keep on doing the blog, but we're prioritizing video scripts over blog articles. One thing I know is we talked about like on the quick response videos that we put out, we're going to start putting like the scripts of those on the blog under the embedded videos, just like for those who really prefer to read instead of watching a video, even though those are pretty short. There's like 4 minutes or less videos, but we're going to be doing that at some point soon. So top 5 articles. Number 5 is the Sealioning article. And which goes with that video. Number 4, this was an article from a philosopher friend of ours, Fine-Tuning the Responsibility Objection, a reply to David Boonin. So if you like top 1% of pro-life versus pro-choice philosophy, that article is for you. It's great. Number 3, this was an article that Andrew wrote. Abolitionists are going to get people killed and the SBC just helped them. So the only other time we decided to talk about abolitionists last year, we didn't want to talk about them anymore, but then this huge thing happened with the Southern Baptist Convention where the SBC, unfortunately, thanks to some like abolitionists who were really pushing for this vote, they adopted a resolution that basically denounces any kind of pro-life incrementalism. It's really bad. And Andrew explains, I think, really well just how bad that decision was. And we really hope it gets reversed at the next convention. Number 2 was another piece that Andrew wrote, the Texas Heartbeat Law, an overview. So it's just Andrew kind of explaining what was going on in Texas. Everyone was talking about the Texas bill last year. We just wanted to do an explainer. We're specifically not endorsing the Texas bill. We're not saying that we all think necessarily this is the best strategy for pro-life people, but we wanted at least to explain factually what was happening. That's what's in that article. And then the number 1 piece is something that we wrote most of previously, but we added to it this last year. So this is the refuting pro-choice memes piece. Originally, I think the first time we did this was in 2019 or so. And Rachel and I basically wrote this massive piece. Andrew might have been involved. I'm not positive now. Maybe Andrew was. I'm sorry if I'm getting it wrong. I think this was like my idea and Rachel did a lot of the work, but either way, we just had like a bunch of categories of memes that you see on Facebook or whatever and ways to respond. So this year we added a couple of new categories, just given the Dobbs case and what was going on in Texas. We were seeing some categories of memes pop up a lot, as well as some additional images. So that piece got kind of an update and that put it to the number 1 article from last year. And then the top 3 legacy articles, just in case you're wondering, was the one, this is surprising to me. This is the most surprising thing, I think, about all of my notes, is a piece I wrote a long time ago, like 2015, 2016, called Our Experience at the OMSI Prenatal Exhibit Displaying Real Preserved Children. Short version of that is Tim, Jacob, and I on a trip in Oregon went to this Oregon museum because I had heard that it had this display of actual human fetuses that had died in miscarriages and they were displayed, I think displayed really respectfully. It's a bit of a controversial thing for any human to be displayed at all. So you get like this with like the bodies exhibit and things like that. I think it's an understandable controversy. Our team felt a little bit conflicted coming out, but generally on the pro side of it. But it was an experience I'll never forget. And I just wrote a very personal kind of reflection on what that experience was like and the ways that we're thinking about that experience. So for some reason, that ended up one of the top articles from the last year. The second one, the number 2, this would be the Ben Shapiro's response to abortion in the case of rape article. So Tim wrote this piece several years ago after Ben Shapiro's team put out a video on Facebook of Ben Shapiro at one of these, I think it's probably a Young Americans for Freedom event, where he was doing like one of these Q&As in a big hall and he's dealing with abortion in the case of rape. And while we understand that when you're doing something more like a debate or something that's meant to be more entertaining, you're going to do things that you shouldn't do in a dialogue. And minimally, we were saying, if we're going to have dialogue with pro-choice people, here are 3 things that Ben Shapiro did in that video that you should not replicate. And then I think it's debatable whether or not Ben should have done any of them anyway. But there's at least kind of some grace there for like, maybe it's a little bit different, or you can at least consider it different in this non-dialogue kind of a situation. The really weird thing behind the scenes, I don't know if I've told this story in public before, we probably, but the weird thing that I always think of when I think about that article was that several days after we posted the article, Ben Shapiro's video got edited. And some of the worst things in it that we talked about were edited out of the video with no note, nothing that said, hey, we've edited this for clarity or like anything like that. It was just invisibly edited, and which we didn't expect. So frustratingly, we hadn't like downloaded the original video because I didn't think there would be a problem. Moving forward, if we're responding to stuff, we're going to download the videos ahead of time. I don't know if that happened because of our article or something else. All I know is it was a tricky problem to solve as far as the blog article goes, because suddenly now our article was talking about some things that are no longer in the video. And so we kind of did a thing with like font colors where we kept in like, trust us, we're not making it up. This stuff was in there. and our response to it. But being clear, some of this is not in the current version of the video. And then the number one piece was, is abortion 14 times safer than childbirth? This is a great piece that a few years ago, one of our research fellows, Dr. John Ferrer, wrote this piece, really get into detail on how that stat, that abortion is 14 times safer than childbirth idea, comes from one research study. And the study is incredibly flawed. So flawed that basically no one should be quoting this statistic anymore. And he explains all the reasons why. So if you haven't seen that, if you haven't seen any of these, like, check out, again, the links will be in the show notes. Hopefully that will be helpful to you. I'm really looking forward to this next year. We're getting the podcast back up. We also have a lot of work that we're doing on the Equip for Life Academy. Still hoping to get that out. It's a little bit, we're still trying to figure out exactly how we're going to pull that off with a lot of speaking events and all of that, but we're doing our best. We're going to try to figure this out. And Equip for Life Academy is kind of our big project. Again, this is a curriculum that we are writing right now. And there's going to be videos, there's curriculum, there's slides, there's all kinds of stuff. And we actually in DC, we were just filming some role play dialogues. We just went outside to a park and filmed some dialogues that Emily and Meredith filmed. So it was really cool to get outside the studio and film. And but there was also a technical challenge of I need so many batteries to pull that off. So that was a challenge, but it was something we're going to be doing a lot of this year, is filming roleplay dialogues like that. I just end up being really helpful to people, I think, who are learning this stuff for the first time. How do you put these pieces together in real time? And so we are working a lot on that this year. It's kind of the really big project for this year. I've got a few other things cooking, but that is going to be the huge project this year. And if you want to help make it happen, and if you maybe didn't give at the end of last year and you would like to give, or if you would like to see this podcast not get slowed down when I'm speaking a lot, a video editor on staff would be the solution to that problem. And if you were willing to donate to help make that possible, we're still trying to raise about $50,000 in new or increased giving. So if you're a current donor and you typically give, let's say, $50 a month, if you up that to $100 a month, then I would count that as 50 times 12 towards this new giving. Or if you're a new donor, you've never given before, but you're excited about what we're doing, or what we've been doing has been helpful to you as a pro-life advocate, then I would definitely ask you to consider supporting what we are doing, because while it might look sometimes like we're doing great and the videos look good, or we're all over the place, we are super underfunded, we are understaffed, and there's a lot of things that we really want to do. And the only way to make those things happen anytime soon is more staff. And so it's not like I need to spend a whole bunch of money on more video equipment or other things. It's just a matter of bringing on some more help so that we can get more stuff out and get that out faster. All of that stuff, hopefully, to help you as a pro-life advocate. So thank you so much for your interest. Thank you for caring for us. If you did give at the end of last year, I'm really grateful for what we did raise. It is really cool that we were able to raise $50,000 in kind of new and increased giving, and that's going to really help us this year. Thanks so much for helping us, and we'll see you next time.